Hi, everybody. Welcome to the shit show. I did not plan that at all. I just pulled it out of my ass. So here we go. I am here, and I started this show because I know that there are people that are currently going through a shit show, have been through many shit shows, and when you're in the thick of it, you can barely see that there's a way out or that there's a light even at the end of the tunnel. And what I like to do is interview guests and after they've overcome a certain shit show and ask them, what it was that happened in their life, like the circumstance that happened. Maybe there was a rock bottom, maybe you stood back and just thought, oh my God, this is such a shit show. Like, we've all said that. And then there's also a turning point where things start to change. Maybe your attitude changes or your thoughts and feelings about what happened. Then you start to climb out and then you triumph and you have these lessons that you've learned about yourself through the whole process. And that's exactly why I created the shit show and really want this to affect a lot of people, just so they know they're going to get through whatever they're going through. And there is a light at the end of the tunnel. And we're here to share about it, the aftermath, I guess. So I have Greg Udich on my show today. Hola!
Hello.
I know, I'm so excited. So Greg and I have known each other. We met. It's been a hot minute. It's been like, I don't know, several years.
So I think at least like 2 or 3 years, maybe 2 years, I feel like.
That's not, which really means probably 3 or 4 because it feels like 2, but I think it's
right.
Probably long. Anyway, he's a karaoke king. We karaoke together. That was so fun. We must do that again. Greg is also in marketing by day. And from what I think he might share, has discovered through going through this shit show or whatever shit show he wants to share about, discovered that he loves improv and might be writing. And anyway, I cannot wait. Oh, I wanted to mention the creative renaissance. You've gone through your own creative renaissance, which, oh my gosh, you have to like trademark that because it's so awesome.
Isn't that like amazing? I literally thought of that like, a week ago. I was talking about something and I'm like, oh yes, like it's a creative renaissance.
Yes. Trademark that shit. Okay. So Greg, there are people watching and they are, going through whatever shit show they're going through right now. So I would love for you to share, what's calling to you to share for your shit show. And tell us what happened, if there was one thing, or if not, just, let us know what happened.
Yeah, for sure. First off, I just want to start, like, I love what you're doing. And I love that, I love the shit show and I love watching when you put these videos out and kind of, to be frank, like, I feel like you were a little bit of a catalyst of that helped just in watching some of these small little videos of a whole piece of a bigger pie that came together. And it's like, Greg, just like do the things.
Thank you. I received that.
Yes.
Thank you.
That. And in doing that, you've kind of inspired me to really share my story a little bit more. And me going through this journey, I realized there's so many people that organically are kind of like just asking about my story. Like, oh my gosh, like, wow, I can't believe you're like doing that. Aren't you scared shitless? Aren't you? That's so crazy. So all the fear and ultimately, like, I just keep trying to follow the fear, and in doing that, make myself more vulnerable and share this. So, the backstory here, about 2 years ago, April 2017, my dad passed away. My dad died, he was young. I think he was 59 at the time. He would have been 60 in that July. He had cancer. He was a lifelong smoker, big drinker, but ultimately got cancer. And I should probably also start this with the beginning of that year in 2017 was a literal shit show year. My mom, the beginning of either in December of that year before or in that new year, got diagnosed with breast cancer.
Oh.
She had a breast cancer situation she was dealing with. Sorry, Mom, if you didn't want me to share that, but it's part of the story. Um, she went through her thing. She recovered. It was caught quick enough where she, got over that. In the
Mm-hmm.
process, her and my dad, I think, became a little bit closer. And which was great. And then, short couple weeks after that, my dad got diagnosed with cancer.
Oh.
Uh, and literally, with this was in, I think, maybe the beginning of March, maybe late February, when my mom and dad called to tell me that he had cancer.
Mm.
Of course, everybody's optimistic. He actually went through a small bout of cancer before. So we're like, whatever, he'll get through this. It ended up being it was lung cancer, ended up being very taxing on his body, and he ended up passing away. We lost him towards the end of April. I think it was like April 24th or so.
Oh my God, that's so quick.
Yeah, it happened so quick. Of course, I didn't think my father was necessarily going to die, but you somewhat prepare that this is going to be a long struggle. My grandpa, when I was in junior high, died of lung cancer. It was kind of a
Mm-hmm.
very long process. But that, in one weird way, it was a blessing because it opened up kind of like just this channel of energy with my dad that I, never really had.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot that we'll probably unpack as we talk about this with my dad, but I am a gay man. I don't think I've ever officially said that any place like in the air. So yes, I'm gay. If you didn't know.
Wait, what? No, I'm
Well, I mean,
kidding.
like
What, Greg?
so growing up with that, my dad was a very typical like blue collar. I grew up on the south side suburbs of Chicago.
Mm.
Sports loving. He drank a lot, but like just it was your very typical guy's guy that kept their feelings to themselves and like was really basically having a gay son probably was like not on the radar at all, or something that he probably had the capacity to deal with. And then there was me, who was also a little shit of my own right and didn't make
Mm-hmm.
it necessarily easy. But so we were always butting heads growing up, and
Okay.
we didn't really have a close relationship, even though my parents were still together. And it was like, not that I ignored my dad or said like I was estranged, but I also have two sisters. They were much closer. Me and my dad just kind of drifted apart, and I did my own thing. And just
Mm.
kind of pushed towards almost like a path to prove, like towards the successful corporate gig to like prove something to him in some way, shape, or form.
Mm-hmm.
But in the process of him going through cancer and dying, like he became more vulnerable. Like I remember like getting text messages from my dad. I never ever texted with my dad. Like and I think I got a text like with an emoji, and I'm like, what the
Who
hell
are you?
is this? So in that short process, like there was some very organic moments that came through that I feel like I actually had some closure with my dad when he
Mm.
passed. Of course, I didn't, want him to go at all, but
Mm-hmm.
I there are some things I regret that I didn't have the courage to do or address with my dad earlier. And so in my dad's passing, it just and dealing with a parent's death in general brings up a lot of emotions, but it really just kind of continued this suck hole of a year of emotions of
Mm.
dealing with all these feelings again of having my dad be, he had a lot of anger, a lot of rage, a lot of it that was based in anxiety, I think, which I've
Mm.
more come to learn, and kind of reconciling all of these feelings on top of just trying to like move forward and like figure out like what does this all mean, and try to make sense of
Mm.
it. And then at that time I'm working in a corporate job, which was great and everything on paper, like it should be the most amazing thing, but me just feeling
Mm-hmm.
stuck and like what's the point of this, I'm not thoroughly enjoying myself, and really just having a lot of anger myself creep in, whether it was completely related to my dad or just opened up an emotional
Hmm.
kaleidoscope of emotions. There was
Now,
just a lot.
were you feeling this anger come up when your dad was sick, like when he was still living?
Not so much, because I think I was very much trying to be like a nurturer and be supportive.
Mm.
And I mean, of course, yes, there are things that you think of a little bit, but this also happened at a time where I was really busy with work. Like there was this traveling tour thing that I was kind of in different parts of the country
Mhm.
going around, And the one thing I do regret is I didn't make myself more available to be there with my dad. I think I maybe saw him 1 or 2 times in person while he was sick, because I was like living this little, like, kind of almost like tour rock star life in a way, traveling out. There was meetings, and my mom and both my dad being like, "Oh, it'll be fine." Like, again, thinking it's going to be a longer journey,
Yeah.
him going through cancer, and we, of course, didn't think we were going to lose him. So there were more a little bit of feelings of, I think, like regret that I didn't,
Mm.
do that more, and I didn't acknowledge. And one of the one times that I did get to see him is when he had a short kind of like lapse where he wasn't in a coma, but he just was really out of it. And
Mm.
he was in the hospital, and there wasn't much interaction. But then just a few days later, he like came back to life in a way, and was like, again, texting me. Like, I think he texted me a picture of like him where he had an oxygen mask on, and there was like an
Oh,
elephant emoji or something, which again, I'm like, who are you? Like,
what?
what?
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know? And so when I
So,
got the news from my mom,
yeah.
I think it literally was like a week later that my dad passed. It was just like a
Mm.
what? Like, so just crazy, because he was on the mend. Like, I thought we'd have a little bit more time. And the thing that just blows my mind is he was only 59. He was just a few months
So
short of
young.
his birthday. And
Yeah.
just, I think there was a real sense of renewed optimism that kind of happened.
Yeah. Yeah. There's so much to say in all of that. Like, just my dad passed also, but he had about 7 months that from start of the diagnosis to when he passed. Um, and I don't know if this is the same, but I feel like my dad, and he was 67. So up until he was whatever, 66 and a half, he was negative,
Yeah.
pessimistic, just really hard on himself and me and my sister. And then all of a sudden he got cancer, and he was like, it is what it is. Like,
Yeah.
it's just this, let's just be, here today. And I was like, who the fuck are you? But it was so, I feel like the real him came out.
Yeah.
So I was thinking about that while you were talking. And I'm like, and I wanted to ask you, do you feel like that your real dad, once the anxiety is gone and the anger is gone and the depression, or, anything that he feel like he had, or you feel like he had, did it dissipate? And then all of a sudden this, like, his true self came out?
100%. I think that was the
Mm.
weird thing with this is I felt more of my dad, his natural, more pure him, that, through all the demons that he fought throughout his life. I feel like I'm even starting to tear up just a little bit now, like thinking about
Yeah.
that. He really, through all the bad shit that I'm sure I'll talk about, during this time, at the core of it, my dad was such a silly, goofy guy. He was a
Mm.
genuine, nice guy. And like, to me, like, as I will further talk into like just dabbling in this improv world and exploring a lot of these creative things now, like, I really think like a lot of that goofiness that I inherently have comes from him. And just some of the things that, while I know he was miserable, and I think ultimately he did just kind of succumb and give up and didn't fight hard enough towards the end, and I don't blame him for that. um, I think we saw more of that pure him that kind of shone through. And I
Yeah.
know it was definitely hard on my mom, because she did see glimmers of those things that, she first fell in love with him. And, my sisters, my niece and my nephew, like, it just inherently, my dad was like a really goofy guy, but like the demons got the best of him. And
Yeah.
that was a big thing that, kind of where that regret comes in after the fact when he passed, is like all this bubbling and processing of emotions, of seeing things and connecting, and all these things that my mom growing up being like, you're more like your dad than you think, and me being like, I am not like my fucking dad. You're not, I mean, even right now, the fact that I have like a little mustache going, it's the year of the stash shoot, keeping that going. We'll see how long
Yep.
that goes. I get so many people that are like, you look just like your father. And like, a couple years ago, even, I probably would have been like, fuck you.
Yeah.
Like I would be so offended by that. But now
Yeah.
I'm like embracing that and like taking such a different side, and like
Mm-hmm.
flipping and letting go of the anger and rage and things that I think, and guilt that I have
Mm.
even further to that came is, to be honest with you, there was a lot of part of my life. Like, I remember thinking, God, I wish my dad would die. Like,
Oh, yeah.
because we had such a tumultuous relationship. And towards the end, even my dad, I think, would be, very much like, gosh, I want to get out of here, get out of this
Mhm.
life. He just, it was such a true and obvious case of him being so fearful and having so much anxiety that of just the everything of life and consuming. He got married young, had kids young, and the responsibility of having to provide and do that, which I'm sure many people can relate to. Like, I
Yep.
think got the better of him, and it made me realize how much he didn't really follow his. I don't necessarily want to say your dreams, because sometimes following your dreams seems so like this image of grandeur, but like
Airy
just follow
fairy.
your
Yeah.
passions, right? Like, wasn't able to do that, and I literally he became such an angry grump to a degree because of
Mm.
him not even chasing some of those smaller passions, and it just slowly
Mm.
opened up my eyes throughout 2017 of things that I knew I needed to change. But I definitely went through a little bit of a dark place through that year. And I may have outwardly tried to seem optimistic. There probably was moments of things creeping in, of me being a little bit more pessimistic, anger, definitely a lot of arguments with my boyfriend,
Mhm.
Nick, that I live with, who was great through this whole process. But, and him trying to help in every which way he can. Because at one point, it's like, I want to talk about it. The next point, I'm like, no, I'm very, resistant and like,
Yeah.
yeah, leave me alone, rah.
Mhm.
And it was ultimately him that prodded me to go into therapy, which again, I was like, I don't need that. I've never gone to therapy before that. I don't need this. I'm fine. Like, I'm fine.
Therapy's
Um,
awesome.
it is awesome. It is so
Mhm.
awesome. There's such a stigma that, even for myself growing up, that you're weak if you need to do that, or why
Right.
do I need to go to talk to somebody? But there's
Mhm.
so much power in being vulnerable and sharing that. And even going to therapy, from what I thought, starting what I was going for, and where in the process of going, and where the things I talk about that are coming out through this were
Mhm.
like completely, it went from like A to like Z, like definitely not where I thought it was going to be.
Yep. Yep.
That ultimately has been like the shit show of 2017, that like literally, again, it was not your like, oh my God, like I all this shit's falling apart. It was just like
Right.
emotionally was just, I became very lethargic. I'm like, what's the point of all this? What am I doing? Like,
Mm.
things were great. It really shifted my compass, to be honest with you. I really thought my compass in life was going such one way, and like it kind of had to fit and do this thing that I just kind of made the choice to do in college and pursue this path, and kind of led me through a very corporate, tight knit businessman type path. And even the other day, somehow we were looking at like headshots, and there's like my LinkedIn profile. There's this very like professional, where I look like I'm some like 45-year-old man, like headshot. And my boyfriend is like, he never, I guess, never saw it, never saw my LinkedIn. It was like, literally started laughing, and it's like, what is this? And like showed it to his friend last night, and he's like, you look great, you look awesome, but that does not like encapture your energy.
It's not you.
Yeah, and in a way, like that was just another little nugget that made me realize like how much I was really trying to be somebody that I inherently am not. And there's nothing wrong with that path, but I wasn't happy in it, and I started to do things that put me into more of that light, to be, to be a little bit
Mhm.
brighter, to, I think the end of 2017 or the beginning of 2018, I love the time of the new year, just that energy of like
Yep.
rethinking, doesn't have to be always be the new year, but it's just everybody's kind of
Mhm.
in that mindset. I really just was like, you know, screw this. Like, I need to like face this fear. I need to claw through this and make a conscious
Mhm.
choice to be more present and to live the life that I want to live, and to unearth the dreams that I almost didn't know what those dreams were again. And slowly through the process of 2018, there were multiple things that happened,
Hmm.
that led me to this journey of like being the most happiest I remember being in such a long time, most optimistic, the most full of life,
Oh,
um,
so
and, and
cool.
and the most vulnerable,
Yeah.
and being my most authentic self. I realized how
Mhm.
much, kind of when you grow up as a gay kid and you're struggling with that, am I gay? Oh, you have a super straight father. Like you resist that, and you start to paint these different pictures of who you think you need to be.
Right.
Which is
And you
why
try to fill that. It's like, that you are a square peg. I use this all the time. Square peg trying to fit in a round hole. And that goes with anybody trying to force themselves to do what other people around them expect them to do. And then you're trying to fulfill their wants for you. It's not even their dream. It's just their want for you.
100%.
Yeah.
And there was, in a way, one of the last conversations I had with my father on a FaceTime, which was like a typical, my mom, FaceTiming with my mom. It was a work event, and oh, hey, here's your father. Talk to your father. And I'm like, what the hell? Like, I didn't want to talk to him. Wasn't ready. But it was literally the last time I talked to my father, really. And there was this really tender moment of him, saying he's proud of me, and knowing like the work path that I was on. Like, oh, you're traveling. Oh, I was thinking I was in Annapolis, Maryland at the time. Like, it's so great. Like, you really have made it. I'm proud of you. Again, like, fall off my freaking seat. Like, what? Like, I knew deep down he was, but we just didn't emote that way.
Did he not say that when you were growing up ever?
No, not really. Again, part of these things that we'll talk about, a little project that I'm unearthing, are all these stories and coming back together with growing up as this gay kid with, this super, straight blue collar, sports loving, not really emotional. The only emotion he really, portrays is either anger or silliness, or completely quiet and silent.
Yeah.
There was just this inherent, I guess, need that through my whole life, which is probably how I, ended up being a performer. Because let's be honest, like, at my core, I am a performer. I've been been like that out of the womb, and through my life, was a performer. And even in arguing with my dad, there was definitely a level of performance piece. But I shifted and went towards something that I think everybody thought I needed to do. I was dealt with a lot of self-conscious issues of myself. I feel like I didn't want to face who I really was, because as a gay man, like, I suddenly was going to be allowing myself to the facade go away quicker. People would see my real self, and just the fear of coming out, at that time, I just went down a different path. And for him to say like, oh, like, he was proud of me, and we had these exchanges of I love you on the phone, and like, that ultimately, it gave me a lot of closure that, just with him, while I still went through this suckle of dealing with all these other emotions, I feel like I maybe would have, if I didn't have that exchange, I would have had a much heavier hand of guilt of like not trying to remedy that relationship.
So when you, when you were growing up, or, any part of your life when your dad was still living, was there ever a time where you said, Dad, I'm gay?
No, I don't think no. I was so scared to come out to my dad. And that is definitely one thing that I had regret. Like, I honestly don't think I fully came out until I was in college. And I really, really didn't come out to my mom, and most people fully in my family, until like my late 20s. Even though, let's be real, I knew I was gay, very young, in high school. I knew it, definitely had experiences, like, but still was so afraid to be my real self.
Yeah.
And part of that probably was just the fear of, the reaction of both my parents, quite frankly. Me and my mom are super close. She's great with it, like, now, like, but it was a hard time for her as well too. And it did definitely perpetuate some of that fear that you think you're going to have. And part of it too probably was like, financial, like, oh, they're going to cut me out, all these things that, unfortunately, there's so many young gay kids out there that I know go through this. And my life was not horrible. Like, I actually had a really good life, despite all this stuff, and you really look back on it. And I know there's people out there that have so much more fucked up stories, and, are completely shunned. But in that, there was a legit fear.
Yeah.
And
and I'm hoping this will help them.
Yes. Yeah.
Just say it's okay. If you haven't talked about it yet to your loved ones, it's okay. Forgive yourself. Yes. Or I want to ask you, what would you tell them?
What would I oh God, like, that's in part of going through this process. I think about that all the time. I would say is exactly what you said. Like, it is okay to be completely scared. But what I will say is, follow your fear. Like that is something you'll hear me talk about a little bit later as I talk about improv, but follow that fear a little bit, because what I ultimately did was I allowed that fear to get the better of me, that
Mm-hmm.
allowed me to deny breaking through those walls a little bit sooner and having a better relationship with my father, with some members of my family, which now I have a great relationship with, that I wish I plowed through. I know that's not necessarily going to be the case for everybody out there,
Mm-hmm.
um, but sometimes a lot of these walls and these fears are so much more self-induced and
Absolutely.
right, but
Absolutely.
as a scared little, gay boy,
Mm-hmm.
like I was scared. I was so afraid. I didn't want to lose that love. I mean, even looking
Yeah.
back, and I found a journal a diary that I like haphazardly kept throughout, my teen years. Like I, reading some of it, you could tell it's so cryptic, because I think back to that moment back down, like I was afraid of my sister seeing and reading it and going back and saying like,
Oh,
oh, Greg's gay, or like all these little
mhm.
things that I realized like I would was not being my true authentic self. Like,
So you weren't
and
even vulnerable in your journal,
no,
afraid of people reading it. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, like so I
Oh.
really like put myself in this like bubble of a box of just like not finding and not being myself. And there's probably some very self-destructive like behaviors that in doing that I started to engage with and didn't allow myself to be, where now I'm like
Mhm.
such a freer person in that process. But for all those gay kids out there and the people, and like
Mhm.
I know it's so cliche because everybody says it, but it truly does get better when you live your truth and you open that up and you make yourself vulnerable. For some, it may be hard and it sucks, but there's such a great support system out there in the world of more people that care than
Mhm.
those that don't, and you'll eventually find that way. My biggest regret, one of the biggest regrets is not allowing myself to conquer that fear a little bit sooner, to have maybe opened
Yep.
up my shell a little bit more. But I do love
Yeah.
my life. I'm happy, the way things
Yeah.
have come. But there was a lot of anger. There was a lot of regret. Like even with my dad dying, like I was definitely drinking a lot more. I was definitely snappier a lot more. Like it just was.
Yeah, that's what I want to ask you about. I want to ask you about that dark time when you were talking about that earlier, and if that's kind of the calm before the storm, or maybe that is the storm. So before it turns to, like when you're in the middle of the eye of the hurricane, you know, I don't know, 8 hours later there's sun, and then the clouds part. So if you could talk about that dark time,
Yeah.
and I don't know if you're thinking of something very specific, but it sounded like you were.
Yeah.
Talk about
There was
that.
just a period where I didn't even realize like I was going down it. Like for the most part, at top level, surface level, I'm very, cordial, very, enthusiastic for the most part, try to be very friendly. But slowly but surely, as, the months went on post my dad's death, like I started to retreat a little bit more. I started to get very introspective. I, would watch so many shows that I knew would make me cry. Like where Nick,
Uh,
my boyfriend, is like, oh my God, we got to watch this dang, emo crap again. Like, but like there was I knew I was getting like a cathartic release, I guess. I didn't necessarily know it at the time, but like was just sucking into all these things of like trying to, I guess, get in touch with my emotions a little bit. But
mm,
it just slowly, I was drinking more. I was angry, always talking about how I want to quit my job, that I wasn't fulfilled. Like I'm just stuck in this environment where I just felt stuck. And there wasn't necessarily one specific instance of like, oh my God, everything fell apart, but it slowly just felt like what am I doing? Like, and like I was kind of had
mhm,
the walls were closing in a little bit more, and I didn't know what to do next. Like I think I had kind of all this clear path and this compass a little bit, even though it might not have been my true path. Like I had this compass of where I thought I was supposed to do. I had a lot of success in, my marketing career, where
mhm,
I climbed the ladder and I was very strategic with the next step. And like I got to kind of where I wanted to go,
mhm,
and I didn't necessarily know what was next. And then bam, my dad died in this process, which opened up this whole other layer, which really shifted that compass, where I really had this feeling of like, oh my God, I like, well, even if I were to quit my job, what would be next? I don't know. I don't know what's next. And that would send me down into like a deeper little bit of that suck hole I kept
Yeah.
using. And that this whole phrase you hear many people saying, the energy attracts energy. So like I just was attracting that negative energy because I was putting out a lot more negative energy,
Mm-hmm.
and it became cyclical. And like I know Nick, as much as he was trying to be supportive to me, would get pissed off at me and frustrated with me because I wasn't making it easy either. And him wanting to talk about like, oh, share a story about your dad or dig in a little bit and thinking that he's helping me, but then I would be like, I don't want to talk about it, and closing myself out a little bit.
Now,
So it's
did it
just
ever show up like, where there'd be dishes in the sink and like you'd go off about it? Like, and of course, that's not the issue. That is
yeah,
not the real issue. Or, that you left your shoes and, dirty underwear out or, whatever. Like, it's never about that. It's always something deeper. But to your spouse, like mine, I remember, speaking of job, like I had this amazing job where I was making a shit ton of money and I was like, I want to leave. He goes, do you know how many people would kill for that job? I'm like, fuck them. They can have it.
exact same
Yeah.
with you.
So it's hard for the support person
100%.
to be empathetic, but also be like, what are you doing? Like you're changing into this other person. And anyway,
It's
yeah.
funny that you bring that up. Like even with like were there these instances or like dirty dishes, it was actually the opposite. I think I became like more of a control freak where it was like,
Oh,
why the dishwasher isn't loaded in the right way, like that doesn't go there, this doesn't go there, like
mm-hmm.
trying to have all these things in the right places where I just wasn't. I was trying to control the situation into a way where it's like I'm not controlling anything except it's creating anger, and that anger was coming out in really messed up ways. And
Yeah.
yeah, like there was a lot of that. And Nick, you've met Nick, and many people know
Mm-hmm.
Nick, like bless his soul, is like the kindest, most
Yeah.
gentlest, amazing energy ever. And so like he is trying to like reconcile, like, how do I deal with this nut job right now, which
Yeah.
is really what I became.
Yeah.
I just was on edge a lot.
Yes, absolutely. And do you feel like you ever reached a point where you felt like you were depressed?
Yeah, I think I wouldn't necessarily have said I was depressed going
Mm-hmm.
through the process, because again, you hear all of these people who talk about depression, and you feel like, oh, like I'm not depressed, or oh, I'm not worthy of considering I'm depressed, or whatever you want to call it. Like you feel like there's people out there that have it worse off, and I'm not depressed, and I didn't necessarily think I was during that time, but now in
Sure.
like retrospect and looking back in it, kind of like, yeah, like I did kind of become a little depressed and started to show a little bit of those symptoms where I feel like if I didn't start to take the steps that got me out of it, I
Mm-hmm.
probably would have been like in a full-fledged depression that would have completely derailed me even longer. So luckily, like I did kind of find my way out of it. And
Do you remember a turning point? Like, was there a certain something?
yeah, there is a certain something. So it actually started. So my boyfriend Nick, he also part of the reason him wanting to come to LA. I've been very fortunate, been able to move around a lot with the company that I work with. I've been in a few great cities, but ultimately when I met Nick, he wanted to come to LA. And I was like, I got all this great success. Let's move around. Cool. Like we eventually got to LA. He wanted to come to LA because he wanted to always take classes at the Groundlings, which is an improv school here in LA. Like he had
Okay.
dreamed of that. And he started doing, improv, and he was getting into it. And, I was like, oh, this is cool. Like was very supportive of him. And he would always say, I think you should really do improv. Like you always talk about how, you miss being a performer back in the day and all these stories. He's like, you're funny. Like, you're witty. Like sometimes you're funnier than I am. Like, I think you'd be great at it. And of course I'm like, hell no. Like I'm
Right.
not doing improv. Like that chapter is so closed. Like I'm in LA. Like there's like 9 gazillion actors out here. Like
Right.
I'm like, who am I to come in? Like I'm gonna be eaten alive. Like blah, I'm not good enough. Like wow,
Oh
all this.
yeah.
So
All those old beliefs start to come up. Yeah.
yeah, I didn't want to face that, and so he would say it every now and then finally, right around in December, around the Christmas time, he got me an improv class at iOS, rest in peace, which actually recently closed, but that's a whole different story.
Oh, you mean
Or
just this recent Christmas he got you that?
no, of last year, 2018.
Last year, okay.
2018. This improv class, like level 1 improv at iOS here in Hollywood, and I remember being like, holy shit, like no way, like I'm not doing this. But then like him just kind of talking me into it, and I was like, fine, like okay. And I think we actually went to Vegas over we I think we both kind of split up for the holidays. Like he went to his family, I went to mine, just because I was like, oh, I gotta go deal with my family, my dad's death this year, the first Christmas. His grandma passed away earlier in the year, so it's like, oh, I should go with my family. So we split up. We ended up going to Vegas for New Year's Eve, which was great. And we just kind of had this like, let's just have fun. We went and saw a bunch of great shows, and I just kind of like had this spirit of like, okay, you know what, like just like carve out of this, like just try to do something, like don't be afraid of this, like just give it a go. Like what is it going to lose, or what are you going to lose? Just try it. So literally that Saturday after New Year's Eve of 2018 was my first improv class. I took that first improv class and literally like it just opened up this can of awesomeness that I did not realize I was denying myself, and connected me so naturally, organically to part of me that I didn't realize I was missing. And I literally took an improv class just about every week in all of last year. Graduated once iOS closed. There were some issues there, whatever. I was like, all right, I got to continue this, and I almost stopped. I almost was like, oh, let me have a think about this. Where do I want to go next? But just as like, nope, I got to stay on the train. Like I ended up going to West Side Comedy Theater here in Santa Monica. I was able to jump into their level 2. Like a lot of the theater communities were like, hey, we're sorry about the closing, like jump in here. I'm like, you know what? Nick was doing iOS. Like I'm going to try to do my own thing, build my own community a little bit here at West Side Community or West Side Comedy, and went through their 6-level program. Recently graduated their improv program in December, and literally at the end of December was asked to join one of their alley teams, which is kind of like their bridge between their house teams. But it's right now like a 6-month commitment where you're performing 2 times a month, and hopefully more. But it just opened up, like literally like a year ago, just thinking, holy shit, like there's no way in hell like I'd be performing on stage, or that I would have completed this journey. And there's so many things that have come along with me just following that fear a little bit, which ironically a lot of in the improv world, they say that follow the fear, like it's on the other, what the greatness is on the other side of fear. Our ego shuts down so much, and in me doing that, I'm like, oh my God, like I was so afraid to even like identify myself with like, oh, I'm an actor, oh, I'm a performer, like because whatever negative stigma there may be of people, oh, you don't have your stuff together, oh, you're gonna live a life of like the actor's life,
poverty and
right, whatever. But you know what? It's almost this case of like I could make diddly squat, but you know what? I still feel like I'm gonna be so much more happy than I was fulfilling a path where I was just so sucked into my corporate day job where that was the only thing that I was doing. And so this opened up like a channel of like, and there's so many other things that I did throughout the year that I'm happy to talk about a little bit, but the improv was definitely something that like put me back into this creative renaissance. Now I'm not being like oblivious to the fact, and they're like thinking like, oh, like I'm just going to quit my life completely. And like, I'm just going to like make a living as an improv artist. Like, no, like you don't necessarily make a lot of money doing improv, but it's opened up so many paths and so many things.
Oh yeah. If you could, why not?
Right. Exactly.
If you could, like who fucking cares what, like if people say, oh, you can't make a life of that. Well, chances are they're probably still climbing the ladder.
Yeah.
And if that's their goal, great. But when you were talking, when you said open up a can of awesomeness, I was thinking about like those old, like gag gifts where, you know, you'd pop the top and then out the snake would come out, only like, you know, like glitter would come out. Like you just, but it also makes me think of the pent up
Yeah.
creativity
Yeah.
in the can before you open it.
100%.
Yeah.
There's a little analogy that I've been kind of giving people lately that I feel like really describes the feeling and makes it translate to people for them to understand a little bit more clearly. It kind of relates to what you just said.
Mm-hmm.
Being a gay man, like it's kind of like, you know what? I decided, you know what? I'm not gonna follow that. I'm gonna push that back down. Being gay. You know what? I married a woman. You know what? We got married. It was great. Probably happy. Like, you know, have a good job, like good house, life is good, have a couple kids, like have been able to like get my way through that. And
Mm-hmm.
then all of a sudden, one night I got drunk and I kissed a boy, and I'm like, holy shit, I like boys. I want to kiss more boys.
Mm-hmm.
Oh my gosh, like, wife, I'm sorry, I love you, but I love, like, that's kind of the feeling, how it feels, me reconnecting to my performer
Mm.
soul, and just taking the leap into improv. I don't want to be naive with it, but it definitely was a catalyst that opened up this range of feelings, that opened up that the can of glitter, if you want, whatever it is, that can of awesomeness that made me
Mm-hmm.
realize, like, holy shoot, like, I denied myself. I literally
Yeah.
kind of put a part of me back in the closet and stuffed it way down. And ironically enough, there were so many signs throughout, my, 20s and college and all this stuff that showed that, like, I still inherently, that was such a part of my soul. I was always dating like performers, actors, rock star, like musician type folk. I was
Yeah.
always found myself connected to that world just a little bit. Even my boyfriend Nick now, like, he is a performer, he's a singer, he's got that stuff, like, that's such a part of our life. And even when we would go to things, like, before I had this whole improv discovery and reconnection to my performer roots, I would almost be like so cynical about things and almost even more critical of people doing this path. Like, oh, that was great, but oh, whatever. Like, the show was kind of so-so, or whatever, whatever kind of way you want to put it into. Where I now, I have so much more kindness in my heart to a
Mm-hmm.
degree. I have so much more, vulnerability that's being exposed. And again, I never could have fathomed, even like the people that have come up to me and friends of friends that are like, gosh, this is so like inspiring, the
Mm-hmm.
journey that you have gone on. And I've shared some of it and brought it more out to the open, like, just to see the shift in your energy. And to me, that like blew my mind, but also was like, oh my God, like, I'm on a path that's a little bit more me. And,
Yes.
like,
Yes.
that's all you can do.
Yes, you're so like you're lit up talking about it. And that's what, like, I think that you and I both agree, like, that's what we want to spread to others. And I know when you talk about face your fears, fuck, that's such an easy thing to say and such a hard, when people are in a shit show, maybe they haven't come out to their parents either, or, to their friends or, whatever, and they still have this pent up inside of them. So when you say face your fears, the first thing that you think of that would be a super baby step, what would
It's
you say
it's
that they
saying,
could take?
yeah, it's saying yes, like, literally, like, follow your fears, like,
Mm.
yes, I'm going to try. Like, sometimes there's just this, you have to start with your own mindset too, a little bit. It's just take that first step, follow that fear, do something that is like, for me, like, just using this improv example, I was like, no, I'm not going to take this. Just to have the little shift of just considering it was like, all right, you know what? I'm going to face that fear. Like, let's listen to this side a little bit, and like, let's explore it. All right, let's give it a go. And eventually you take those little steps and you
Mm-hmm.
go there. Half the time it's just, I have a good friend, that I grew up with, that has recently, been going through some stuff and has been always very inspiring and very funny. But she recently started this Facebook group, and I forget exactly what it's called, but one of it's like, do the things. And I love that, because like, that's exactly like it. Everybody is so worried about like what the end goal is going to be. Sometimes you just have to do the process. You just have to enjoy the process and just do the things and just show up and just say yes and just try. Like just try.
Oh my God, I love, 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 love that. I love what you just said. Just
Like,
say yes. Like say yes to yourself.
yes.
I feel like that the people that and you know we've all been where in a space where we you know the fear takes over, the doubt and everything, and then so what my mind has done before is my ego brings up like all of the shame, and shame is such a that's a tunnel you
100%.
that's a tunnel that's really hard to get out of once you start, you know, shaming yourself and bringing up, oh, remember that other time where you fucked up and remember that and you suck and, you know, all those beliefs from earlier. So I feel like, you know, even saying to yourself or dealing with that shame or just kind of saying, you know what? Okay, I did do that. That's in the past. And overall acceptance, when you were talking about Nick, I was thinking he sounds very accepting, like he's just very accepting of people's differences. And okay, so you know you're doing this marketing job and okay, yeah, you need to do improv, and you know he's just very accepting of like my husband's very accepting too about I have a crabby day, or and it's more about me than anybody else, you know. But just anyway, I feel like I just wanted to share that whole shame thing because that can be such a deep, dark place.
It's so true. Like, I love
Mm-hmm.
that you call that out. Like, I did not realize how much inner shame I was harboring. And even just going through therapy, there's so much things that I realized, like, I self-edit myself so much. There's even little moments of shame where I'm like, I was in therapy and I remember I kept saying like, wow, that's wild. Oh, that's so wild. Like all these little breakthroughs. And then I remember going like, oh my gosh, I got to stop saying that's wild so much. And my therapist was like, why? Like you're editing yourself. Who cares? And I'm like, oh my gosh, like you're right. Like so much of this stuff is self-induced. And there's all this, you know, level of shame for me wanting to admit what it is that I really wanted to do that brought me joy. Shame for like, gosh, I'm making more money than I ever have in my life or ever thought I would have, and why am I not really happy 100% with this? Or you know, like all the there's so many different varying levels of shame.
Yep.
You know, even you know, being a gay man, like the shame of like having to hide who you are and little feelings of like, oh, I can't embrace a relationship or explore something with somebody because the shame of what everybody around me is going to think. And you know, like you just have to be you. I know it's like crazy and it's hard
I
to do.
know it's cliche and people say, oh, that's so much easier said than done. But when you first experience that, even just taking that little baby step of saying yes to yourself and just saying yes to things that you normally maybe wouldn't even consider, and just like opening that can of awesomeness, you know, it starts to almost flip a switch inside you. And all of a sudden this light is sparked. Yeah.
But the other thing that I've come to realize too, that's important that I think to note with this is give yourself the like, okay to know that it's probably going to get messy if you don't like sometimes we feel, and even myself doing it, like I can be a control freak. I am a control freak sometimes, even in ways that I don't think I am. Like to-do list. Oh, I gotta do this. I gotta get this done and blah, blah, blah. Oh, I'm gonna do this journey. It's gotta be done this particular way. Like to let go some of those self-imposed, you know, restrictions and rules that really don't matter to anyone but you. And you know, if you mess up a little bit on the journey or it doesn't happen the way that you think it's going to, or like allow yourself a little bit of that freedom to be like, oh, oops, okay, like recoup. If that's still something you want to do, get back on the train and like follow it. But chances are, if you're really following the things that you want and getting yourself a little bit more closer to that joy, whatever it may be, you're gonna easily stay on that train, like, and stay and go on to that journey of like awesomeness. And
Oh, so cool.
it's crazy. Yeah.
So I want oh, sorry. I wanted to ask you, because when we were talking about shame, we were talking about Oh, okay. It made me think of a question of when earlier you were talking about a couple of regrets
Mm,
with your dad
yeah.
or not being able to say something or address something. Have you forgiven yourself for those things?
I think it's a work in progress, but
Mm-hmm.
ultimately, yes. And part of where I'm moving forward in this year and embracing these things in myself um, is trying to have some cathartic moments to let those out and truly forgive myself. But
Mm-hmm.
I think ultimately, yes, this year I have forgiven myself a bit, and just doing things like this, like saying like,
Mm-hmm.
yes, I am going to show up and I'm going to take these little steps to put myself out there to connect a little bit more with my real self instead
Mm-hmm.
of, you know, the self that everybody thinks I should be and say the things that I should be. Um, I slowly but surely am like, hey, and again, improv. Sometimes it's like it's much easier than therapy. Like it's a form of therapy to a degree where you just realize a lot of truths that come out organically, and it's like literally one of the only times that I really feel 100% present is when I'm on stage and doing scenes
Mm-hmm.
in improv. But in doing that has opened up so much channel of energy, so many channels of energy that I kind of realized like, yes, I think I have forgiven myself
Mm-hmm.
for the shame of not embracing who I was sooner, for
Mm-hmm.
being scared of and not having the courage to confront my dad and be honest with who I was to many people. So um, I mean, I can go on and on just
Yeah.
about like being the journey of being gay and all that, and all the instances that got me to where I was. But ultimately, yes, like I have definitely this past year especially has helped me do the groundwork to be easier on myself and forgive myself.
Yeah. Well, and that's another thing that's easier said than done. And maybe a lot of people don't think about like, why would I have to forgive myself?
Yeah.
And maybe I should have asked that question. Like, do you feel like you needed to forgive yourself or need to forgive yourself for, anything that you regret or, whatever from your past? But because that's not necessarily true. But I think that there are, when we tend to shame ourselves, we hold ourselves responsible for things that are causing us more pain.
Yeah.
It's just bringing up that, like you said, it's a cycle of just constantly berating ourselves and coming down on ourselves and just really being hard on ourselves. And I think just saying yes to yourself, but also saying, I really need to forgive myself so I can move on and allow that energy to be open for something else that's going to
It's
come to
it's
me.
so true. Like you're right. There's so many naysayers or people that are like, that sounds so cliche, self help, like whatever. But it's true. And in the process of me going to therapy and there's all of these things that happen together in the perfect mix of reaching myself to this point of being, me coming
Mm-hmm.
back to me. I realized like, yeah, like part of this is me having the ability to forgive myself and saying I
Mm-hmm.
need to forgive myself because there's a lot of like, you know, my dad wasn't, I yes, he was a jerk to some degrees, but like I didn't necessarily make it easier. Like
Yeah.
there are things, in my past that I'm like, ooh, like there's many things where you're just like, oh shit, ooh, like, oh my
Mm-hmm.
gosh, like, like random things like, gosh, if I ever got famous, like I'm screwed. If I would ever run for office, or it's like, but to a point where you're like, sometimes I would cripple myself with these random freaking what if fears. Where in dealing with like therapy, I'm like, my therapist is like, dude, like Greg, like deal with that when and if it comes. If that comes, great, we'll deal with it. You know what I
Mm-hmm.
mean? But like those so many fears that we all go. So we start from point A, but then we go to like, you know, 10 points later of like association where you're like, well, that's not even, deal with one thing at a time, you
Yeah,
know?
exactly.
But forgiving myself is such an important thing um,
Mm-hmm.
that I've been able to do that, I guess I haven't really realized like, yeah, I have forgiven myself and do
It can be an ongoing process too.
yeah, it's surely an ongoing
Yeah.
process. But there was a lot of stuff that I did last year, in addition to improv, that helped really shift my energies and helped get me to a place of accepting more of the positivity, accepting me, coming to terms with that, and allowing myself to realize that this is a journey. Again, there is not just a one and done final step, like, woohoo,
Right.
I get that certificate. It's ongoing, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So like, yeah, I forgive myself, and you know, I
That's
forgive
good.
my dad. Like, there's so many things I forgive.
Good.
Forgive my mom. Like, there's a lot of stuff that you're trying to unpack, that I'm trying to unpack. For to me, just to like live my damn life and just be happy, acting a fool, and doing whatever I need to do.
That's awesome. Okay, I know we've been talking for over an hour. I think we could talk forever. We could talk forever.
Yes.
But I want to ask, what's next for you? What's next for Greg?
Yeah, there's so many awesome things. Like this journey this past year of embarking on this improv training and this discovery has opened up so many channels that I never could have fathomed I would really go on. There are some bigger things that are in the works that hopefully, you know, we'll have to reconnect in a couple months and we can have a whole nother shit show.
Yeah.
But some things that I've done, like I joined a writers group, you know, this year, that through my process where I've got this idea of like, you know, writing is definitely a big passion of mine as well. And something to hold me accountable, facing that fear again of like, oh, could I ever write a book? Who would want to listen to my journey? Oh, am I being like, you know, again, much in my own head, who, like, am I just being like, oh, me, like, no, like, whatever, allowing myself to be like, hey, I have a story. It might help somebody else, like, but it also might be cathartic. So I'm hopefully by this time next year, I could say I wrote a book.
Ah, that's so cool. That's so cool.
I'm gonna try. So maybe with me putting this out there, one more ounce of accountability to hold me to that at least, if nothing else, I'm trying to write a story about me and my dad growing up. It probably will be more essay story, but you know, in essence, it's meant to be more cathartic for me, but also as a lot of things that we talked about, and even just for myself, growing up as a gay kid in this community, I never felt like I could identify with the gay culture or what was around me, and whether it was just a circumstance of my upbringing. Like I never felt like I belonged in that world either, which just like perpetuated some of my own issues. So for me, it's like, all right, maybe if I try to write this from a place of coming of age, I don't know what you want to call it, but just sharing my journey, and showing my side, but also, you know, showing the messiness of my dad and I's relationship, but also getting to show his side a little bit and have a little bit of like that understanding for maybe dads out there that are in a similar place of not knowing how to deal with an eccentric freaking, you know, theater loving superhero, crazy, fanciful kid. Like maybe there is some way to bridge that gap and hopefully make it a little bit easier for somebody else to relate to.
Absolutely.
Together. So that's just one thing on top of many in the creative renaissance that I hope to be embarking on and just doing my thing.
Oh my gosh. Well, and that whole life's too short. I know it's cliche and stupid shit, but it really, really, really is. And you absolutely understand that. And so I just love that you're taking life just with both hands and you're jumping in. So
all you can do is sometimes you just have to just jump.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh my gosh. I'm so happy that you were excited to come on the show.
Yes, thank you so much for like letting me come on and listen to my crazy story. But like, again, I love your energy. Like I'm inspired even more.
Oh, good. I love yours too. Can we please do another shit show?
I would absolutely love to do another shit show.
Awesome.
The shit show. The shit show.
Let's do a shit show. But we're not trying to attract more shit shows. We just want to talk and cleanse through past shit shows.
Exactly.
Yes.
Also, Space Abe says hi.
Space Abe. What's he holding? Or what is that blue?
It's like a laser gun. Yeah, a little insight into my humor. Nick loves that. He's come to like it, but yes, Space Abe. Just a little bit of my silly, goofy.
I love it. That just encompasses you.
Encompasses me.
I love you to pieces, so Greg.
Much. I love you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Mwah. Until next time, my dear.